Imagine a place where time not only moves slower but seems to breathe. Where clocks don't dictate the rhythm of life, but the sun, the seasons, and the distant echo of bells between the mountains. This is not a metaphor. Deep in the Swiss Alps, there are villages that seem frozen in another era, not out of backwardness but by choice. These are corners where modernity has learned to walk barefoot, with respect, and life has chosen to nest in the simple, in the real. This journey is not a tourist trip. It is a descent into the human heart through paths that escape GPS. It is a silent entrance into a universe that still survives in the folds of the mountain. What you will find is not instant comfort but meaning. Here, in these villages almost invisible to the world, dwells a way of life that most have forgotten. Where the map ends, life begins. There, where paved roads become irregular trails, where traffic signs dissolve among ancient trees, and where modern maps lose precision, is where life truly begins. Not an ordinary life, not just another routine, but an existence deeply rooted in the soul of the earth, in the natural cadence of the world, in the whisper of the mountains that watch from their eternity of stone. In these villages hidden among steep cliffs and persistent mist, the day doesn't begin with the vibration of a mobile phone nor the rush of an alarm. The day begins with the breathing of the world. The cold wind, scented with pine and frost, seeps through cracks and eaves, sliding over rooftops like an ancient visitor. Then comes the soft, almost melodic sound of cows grazing on steep slopes, their bells marking a rhythm that doesn't hurry, that simply exists. And in stone kitchens, where there are no microwaves or digital clocks hanging on the walls, the aroma of bread slowly baked with wood becomes a promise. Here time is not measured, it is felt. There are no busy avenues, nor squares with neon lights. The streets are more like dirt lines that turn to mud when it rains, or to ice when the first snow falls. Paths of worn stone from the footsteps of entire generations, where every corner seems to hold a story whispered among the stones. The rooftops, blackened by endless winters, bow humbly under the snow, and the houses, many of them hand-built centuries ago, withstand the passage of time with silent dignity. Their thick walls not only insulate from the cold, but keep the echo of the voices of those who came before. The arrival to these enclaves is not improvised. It is not a journey that can be made in haste or without intention. It is not enough to take a panoramic train or follow tourist routes. To reach these refuges of ancient life, determination is needed. You must ascend in old cable cars that creak as if remembering every winter they've survived. Then descend through narrow paths that border abysses without railings, where each step is an act of trust. One walks, often for hours, through dense forests of fir and larch, where sunlight barely touches the ground. Some trails seem never-ending, as if the landscape itself wanted to test you before letting you into its secret. And then when you finally arrive, you don't find grandeur or spectacle. You find silence. You find calm. You find a life that has chosen not to be interrupted. During the cold months, everything can change from one day to the next. The snow doesn't fall, it imposes itself. It covers paths, erases footprints, and turns every access point into a white labyrinth. Entering or leaving the village becomes uncertain, sometimes impossible. The inhabitants know this. They accept it. They prepare for it. There are no surprises, only respect for the force of nature. The roads are covered by a thick, almost physical silence, and the outside world vanishes as if it had never existed. But even then, when everything familiar seems unreachable, life here doesn't stop. It changes form. It adapts. Because in these villages, life doesn't depend on access to the external, but on the depth of the bond with the essential. When digital connections disappear, another connection emerges, older, more human, more tangible. What is available is shared. What breaks is repaired. There is more conversation, more observation, more listening. Winter doesn't isolate completely, it unites those who know how to endure it together. Here, where the world seems to end, is precisely where another way of inhabiting it begins. A quieter one but no less rich. One where modernity is not an enemy but an occasional visitor. Where routine is not repetitive but ritual. Where each day has a different weight and each season is a lesson. Where the map ends, life begins. And not just any life. One that breathes more slowly, that grows deeper roots, that looks at the world with eyes that have not forgotten that the essential is never in a hurry. Solitude as a companion, not a punishment. Deep in the Swiss Alps, where the mountain sets the rules and distance is measured more in emotions than in kilometers, solitude is neither a condemnation nor an anomaly. It is a constant presence, a silent figure that accompanies without intruding. It is not the result of an accident, nor a consequence of being forgotten. Here, isolation is not suffered, it is embraced. Unlike the urban clamor, where noise is omnipresent and company is sometimes just decorative, in these villages the absence of crowds creates a different inner space. Snow, which for many is merely a Christmas postcard image, takes on the role of guardian here. It doesn't decorate, it obstructs. It covers routes, erases paths, silences signals. It quiets the external so you are forced to look within. And in that looking within, that vertigo of introspection, a deep truth is revealed. Solitude is not the absence of the social but the presence of oneself. Those who live in these villages do not do so out of disconnection or disdain for the world. They are not hermits nor outdated romantics. They are people who have deliberately chosen another kind of connection. More direct, more intimate. With the earth, with the cycle of the seasons, with their own thoughts. In these corners each winter tests the will. Snowfalls bring not only cold, they bring forced introspection. Entire days without going out, weeks without visitors, months without news. In that dense, white silence, the noise within becomes audible. And that noise, the doubts, the memories, the decisions, ceases to be something to avoid. It becomes company. It is not an easy life. There are moments of doubt, of uncertainty, of nights when the wind strikes the windows with force and everything feels too far away. But even in those moments, there is a purpose that sustains. Because here, solitude does not paralyze, it activates. It does not impoverish, it enriches. Solitude is the fertile ground where serene thought, quiet creativity, and the understanding of what truly matters take root. In the city, people often try to escape solitude through distractions. Here it is given a seat at the table. It is spoken to with respect. It is listened to. And in the end, one realizes they were never alone, but surrounded by a world more vast, more sincere, more profound. Because in the intimacy with the mountain, in the stillness of enclosed valleys, a kind of character is sculpted that cannot be formed among crowds. A character tempered by cold and calm, that has learned to find beauty in the smallest things and strength in the invisible. That is the difference between imposed solitude and chosen solitude. The former consumes, the latter builds. Thus, in these villages lost at high altitudes, where wind and ice shape daily life, solitude is not a punishment. It is a mirror. And those who choose to stay do so because they have found in that mirror something the noise of the world no longer allows them to see, their true way of being alive. Life without clocks, without haste. Here there are no bells marking lunchtime or digital clocks dictating the rhythm of the day. In these alpine villages, life happens differently. With the slowness of what is necessary, with the cadence of the natural, with the wisdom of the body that knows when it's time to work and when to rest. Life is lived without hurry. Not because there is nothing to do but because everything that is done carries a deeper, more human meaning. Days begin early, not out of external obligation, but from a custom inherited through generations in contact with the land. Families wake with the first light filtering through the mountains, not with alarms. And they don't rush to the market or order through apps. They grow what they eat, raise what they need, make with their hands all that sustains them. Bread is not bought, it is kneaded with patience, with memory. Each loaf is the result of a technique passed down between grandmothers and granddaughters, between neighbors and friends. A technique not written but learned through slow observation. The flour is not measured with mathematical precision, but with the look that knows when the dough is just right. Cheese, the one consumed thoughtlessly in the city, is here a ritual process. From the early morning milking to the slow curdling and careful pressing, each step is an act of respect for the animal, the food, and time itself. There are no factories. No assembly lines. There is patience and a deep understanding that good things cannot be rushed. The products in these villages don't have labels, but they do have stories. A jar of blackberry jam is not just a mix of sugar and fruit, it is the memory of the afternoon when the berries were picked with hands stained with soil. A sausage hung to dry is not a processed product. It is the result of days of preparation, of seasonings mixed with intuition, and traditions that go back to before the last century. And it is precisely that slowness that gives life here its meaning. Nothing is wasted. Leftover bread is used to feed the chickens. Vegetable peels are turned into compost that will return to the soil. Everything enters a cycle. And each element has its place, its purpose, its dignity. This lifestyle is not nostalgic, it is profoundly functional. It's not about rejecting modernity, but about integrating it in a way that doesn't erase the essential. Here, someone might have access to the internet, yes, but they still prefer to ask the neighbor rather than consult a digital forum. Help is sought with a short walk, not with an instant message. Time is not managed, it is inhabited. Productivity isn't measured by output per hour, but by the real value of what is produced. Lunch is not a formality, it is a moment of connection. Dinners aren't eaten in front of the television, but around the fire, where people talk, laugh, and listen. Living without clocks means living with a different kind of attention. The kind of attention that watches the color of the sky to know if it's going to rain. That listens to the silence to understand if something has changed. That puts the body into each task, not to finish quickly but to finish well. Because here haste has no place. Not because there aren't urgent matters, but because it's understood that urgency is often an artificial construction. And the things that truly matter, like planting, caring, loving, do not understand shortcuts. That is why in these villages time is not lost. It is lived. It is built with small actions, with slow gestures, with full presence. And that, in a world that has forgotten how to stop, is perhaps the bravest way to resist. A true community. In these villages hidden among peaks and forests, the word community is not an abstract idea or a decorative ideal. It is flesh, it is wood, it is shared bread. It is the invisible fabric that shapes daily life, stronger than concrete, warmer than any central heating. It is presence. It is true interdependence, not a staged one. Here, no one lives in isolation even if the village is miles away from any city. No one feels alone even if the winters last for months. Because in these places, community is not proclaimed, it is lived. It is not celebrated with speeches or banners, it is practiced in every simple gesture, in every help given without being asked, in every door that opens before the other even knocks. When a storm breaks out violently and the wind rips tiles off the roof, there's no need to call a repair service. A neighbor is already there, boots on, tools in hand, determination on their face. They don't ask if they can help, they just start helping. If an elderly woman can't go out in the snow to fetch water, someone younger goes without needing to be told. If a family receives bad news, others come close without words, without protocols, just with presence, with hot soup, with shared silence. Decisions here are not made in offices or with forms. They are discussed by everyone in kitchens, in workshops, along the paths. There are no imposed hierarchies, but there is earned respect. There are no leaders with titles, but there are people with a voice. And that voice is heard not out of authority but out of trust. Birthdays are celebrated as community rituals, not individual events. There are no stories on social media, no tables piled with gifts. There are guitars, homemade wine, laughter, songs that come from deep in the throat and that everyone has known since childhood. When someone dies, no condolence message is written. You walk to the mourner's home, offer a long embrace, help with the firewood, with the silence, with simple company. Here, a person's value is not measured by what they own, but by how they are there for others. Not by how many contacts they have, but by how many times they've knocked on someone's door for no reason other than affection. The community is not a consumption network. It is an extended family where everyone, in some way, feels responsible for everyone else. It is a way of being together that doesn't aim to shine, but to support. That doesn't seek efficiency, but humanity. A way of living together that hasn't been corrupted by speed, by indifference, by individualism. In these villages, community is still what it once was in the rest of the world. The certainty that no one walks alone. Childhood with roots. In a time when childhood is often mediated by screens, algorithms, and artificial environments, childhood in these Swiss villages is a living testimony of what it means to grow with your feet on the ground and your soul at ease. Here, being a child means being an active part of a natural and communal cycle. It is not a waiting stage. It is a vital phase of learning that begins with observation, continues with imitation, and blossoms with direct experience. Children are not locked between walls under fluorescent lights or entertained with endless videos. Here they play in the mud, get dirty without guilt, chase chickens, climb trees, drink water straight from the spring, and know the names of plants before they know those of superheroes. They learn to recognize the creak of wood beneath the snow, to predict the weather by watching the clouds, to read the cycles of the moon and the signs of the forest as if it were an ancient language, which, in fact, it is. From a young age, they take part in household tasks. They feed animals, gather firewood, help knead bread, sweep the stable entrance. But they don't do it as punishment or obligation. They do it because they feel part of something real, something necessary, something that gives meaning. And that shapes them. It forges them. It gives them a confidence that doesn't come from ego, but from rootedness. Some must walk long distances to reach school, cross hanging bridges, navigate icy roads in winter, dodge puddles and rocks. But even that journey is part of their education, not just for what it teaches them about effort but for what it shows them about the world they inhabit, its scale, its beauty, its challenge. And although their classes may be smaller, their desks older, their Wi-Fi weaker, these children learn something that in many other places has been lost: how to be, to contemplate, to not depend, to trust their senses, to build identity from the local, from the tangible, from the simple. Stories don't reach them through streaming, they're told by the grandmother beside the warmth of the hearth. These are tales of avalanches, of wolves, of wise farmers, of everyday miracles. And those stories stay with them, like invisible roots that anchor them to the ground and give them wings without disconnecting them. In these villages, children don't just grow up, they take root. And that, in a world that lives in constant motion and uprooting, is a form of freedom few get to know. A freedom that doesn't lie in doing whatever one wants, but in knowing who you are, where you are, and to whom you belong. A freedom born from connection, not from escape. I'll take a brief pause to remind you that if you're enjoying the video, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this. Now then, let's continue. Winter as a test. When winter arrives in the alpine villages, it doesn't come gently. There's no prelude, no rehearsal. It enters definitively, forcefully, leaving no room for improvisation. Temperatures drop as if the earth itself were holding its breath, and snow doesn't fall in gentle flakes. It falls in thick layers that cover everything: paths, roofs, doors, time. Here, winter isn't celebrated with Christmas lights or reduced to an idyllic postcard. It's a season of trial, of endurance, of memory. The community draws inward, regroups, adapts. Houses, built with ancestral wisdom, are sealed with care. Cracks are checked, windows reinforced, logs stacked in the sheds. Each home becomes a warm fortress, not out of luxury but necessity. The stoves are never turned off. The fire never rests. The crackling of burning wood becomes a constant sound, a kind of domestic heartbeat that accompanies the short days and long nights. Families gather around the heat like in times past, and the outside world, with its screens, its stimuli, its speed, disappears behind fogged-up windows. In that forced enclosure, there is no room for modern anxiety. It's not about enduring the confinement, it's about transforming it. The hours that might seem empty elsewhere are filled with meaning here. The goal is not to be entertained, but to create, to recover, to reconnect. Some knit with needles inherited from their grandmothers, repeating patterns that tell stories. Others sharpen knives for the coming harvest season. There are those who teach the little ones to read with books that smell of dust and wood, books that have survived wars, migrations, and decades of silence. Others simply listen. They listen to the fire, to the wind, to the memories that surface more clearly when the world stops moving. Winter does not forgive, but it teaches. It teaches that fire is not just warmth, but connection. That the roof is not just shelter, but refuge. That the kitchen is not just a place for making food, but a sacred space where time slowly simmers. Everything taken for granted during the rest of the year becomes conscious, ritual, essential in winter. And so, beneath layers of snow and isolation, the most human things are cultivated. Because when the harshness of the outside world looms, that's when we turn most deeply inward. Not just into the house but into the soul. The seasons as an inner calendar. In these villages, time is not organized by planners or wall clocks. There are no work weeks or free weekends. The true measure of life is the season. The calendar is printed on the ground, in the trees, in the body. Here, time is not marked with numbers but with transformations. With the sap rising, with the song of a returning bird, with the crack of a branch that signals the coming cold. Spring doesn't burst forth, it awakens. It first hints at itself in the timid meltwater running down the slopes, then in the brave bud breaking through winter bark. It's a season that not only renews the landscape, but also those who live within it. The earth breathes, and with it breathe the bodies that have spent months in refuge. Flowers are not mere decoration, they are symbols of persistence. They are born as fulfilled promises after a long silence. And then the children come back out, dirtying their boots, running with the lightness of those who have been born again. Summer is not a pause, it is a celebration in motion. It is a time of intense work, of sun on the skin, of fields pulsing with life. The gardens become the center of attention. There is sowing, watering, harvesting. Small structures are built, tools are repaired, facades are painted. But there is also singing. The village festival is organized, bottles are uncorked, dancing happens in the open air. Homemade wine passes from hand to calloused hand, and the songs, old, almost sacred, are sung like pagan prayers to the cycle of life. Autumn does not sadden, it prepares. It is the season of introspection. The last fruits are gathered, provisions are stored, firewood is chopped with the precision of someone who knows each log will be needed. The leaves fall, yes, but not as loss, rather as transition. It is a time for gratitude, for calmly looking back and forward with foresight. The forest changes color each day like a living canvas, and the air fills with that dense fragrance mixing moisture, wood, and farewell. And then once again winter will come. Not as an interruption but as part of the whole. In this natural rhythm, everything feels different. There is no anxiety for the future, nor nostalgia for what has passed. Only cycles. Only renewal. Only a life that adjusts to the pulse of the earth. The seasons teach what no clock can, that everything has its moment, that you can't force the bloom nor avoid the frost, that life is lived best when in step with what is, not with what is demanded. And so, each season leaves a mark on the skin and a lesson in the soul. And those who live in these villages don't need digital reminders. They feel it in their bones, in their gaze, in how they prepare, in how they receive, in how they give thanks. Here the seasons don't pass. They are inhabited. And that slow, wise, complete inhabiting, that is the true measure of time. And what about modernity? Often, from the cities, a romantic image is projected onto these villages. An image almost frozen in time, as if living far from the noise meant rejecting everything new. They are imagined as trapped in the past, detached from progress, immune to change. But the truth is much more subtle, more lucid, more wise. These villages are not at war with the present. They don't deny it, nor do they fear it. What they do, with admirable clarity, is filter it. Modernity here does not enter like a torrent that sweeps everything away, but as a gentle current that is channeled with discernment. What is useful is chosen, what improves life without emptying it of meaning. The rest is let go. There are centuries-old houses that now have solar panels on their sloped roofs, installed discreetly without altering the landscape's aesthetic. There is satellite connectivity, yes, enough to manage necessary tasks, stay in touch with distant loved ones, and access information. Some people have laptops, even printers and small smart devices. But these objects do not take center stage in the home, do not dictate the routine, do not replace the hands. Here, technology does not replace ancestral knowledge, it supports it. A farmer may check the forecast on his phone, but still smells the soil to know if it's time to sow. A mother might look up a recipe online, but she prefers the one her grandmother wrote by hand and tucked into the pages of an old notebook. No one rushes to have the latest phone model. In fact, in many cases they don't even know what it is. The new is not valued for its novelty but for its usefulness. Priority is given to what works, what endures, what lasts. A well-sharpened knife, an oil lamp, a sturdy rope are worth more than any app with thousands of downloads. Here, objects have purpose before design. And the most valuable connection is not with the digital cloud, but with the cloud that floats over the valleys and announces the rain. Signal strength is not measured, silence is. Notifications aren't accumulated, the sounds of the environment are heard. The murmur of water, the creak of wood, the voice of a neighbor passing by. Modernity, then, is not rejected. It is received but not worshipped. It is integrated without displacing what already has meaning. Because in these villages, something essential has been understood. That progress should not come at the expense of roots. That one can move forward without forgetting. That one can live in the present without disfiguring the past. The return of those who left. There was a time when many young people left. They abandoned the paths and stone houses in search of a future in the cities, in the universities, in the concrete mazes. They went after promises, jobs, comforts, freedom. They left with backpacks full of expectations, convinced that out there, far away, higher up, ahead, was the life worth living. And for a time it was, or at least it seemed to be. They found speed, options, access. But they also found something else: noise, anxiety, rootlessness, schedules without meaning, windowless offices, hollow routines. Life became a succession of similar days, where everything was immediate but nothing was deep. And then, little by little, some began to look back. Not with naive nostalgia, but with a growing question. What if the future could also be built where it all began? What if we don't have to choose between tradition and innovation, but rather learn to unite them? So they started to return. First a few, then more. They didn't come back defeated, nor exiled from the system. They came back awakened, tired of living just to sustain a lifestyle that didn't feel like their own. They chose to return to their origins, not as those who retreat to the familiar, but as those who rediscover fertile ground with new eyes. And with them they brought different seeds, not only those of memory but also those of the present. They began transforming abandoned barns into bioconstruction workshops, organizing courses on composting, permaculture, ancestral cooking, offering lodging to mindful travelers, those seeking a real experience, not just a pretty photo, selling their handcrafted products online, using modern tools to give value to things made with soul. They didn't come to impose anything. They brought technology with humility, innovation with respect. They planted new ideas in old soil, like watering an ancient plant with fresh water. They learned to live alongside the elders, to listen to their stories, to recover their knowledge. Because they understood that modernity has no value if it's not built upon something deeper. Today they are bridges between worlds. They speak two languages, the language of the village and the language of the digital world. And in that translation they find meaning. Because they know that the future isn't only in big cities or in the fastest advances. It is also in how we choose to live, in what we decide to preserve, in how we balance what we've learned with what we've inherited. The return of these young people is not an exception, it's a symptom of something larger. Of a growing thirst for authenticity. Of a hunger for meaning. And above all, of an awakening consciousness, that perhaps the truly new thing in this century is to inhabit the old with a new gaze. Stories that heal. In these villages, every life is a story worth telling. Like that of Mrs. Greta, who still bakes bread every morning to share with her neighbors. Or Lucas, a young man who returned after studying renewable energy, and now teaches children how composting works using local examples. They are not exceptions. They are the invisible fabric that sustains the soul of these villages. Heroes without capes, without ego, without social media. Just with time, with willingness, with humanity. Beyond tourism. Some travelers manage to reach these villages. Curious hikers, cyclists following secret routes, families fleeing mass tourism. But the ones who truly take something with them are not those who take the most photos, but those who listen. They listen to the silence. The creaking wood. The wind moving through the trees. The voice of an old man telling a legend. And in that moment they understand, there is something here that cannot be bought. A luxury that isn't for sale. In a world saturated with speed, noise, and artificial connection, these villages offer a kind of luxury that few know how to recognize. To live slowly, to live with roots, to live with others. Here the goal is not to have more but to need less. What shines is not what's valued, but what endures. And that silent resistance is perhaps the purest form of rebellion in this century. Final reflection. This is not about idealizing. Living here is hard. There is loneliness, there is cold, there are moments when the isolation weighs like lead. But there is also something that balances everything. Meaning? Because every action, every gesture, every day lived in these villages is not an automatic act, but a conscious decision to inhabit the world in another way. To show that it's still possible to walk barefoot on the earth without feeling like time is being wasted. So next time you think of Switzerland, don't reduce it to chocolate, punctual trains, and expensive watches. Think of these hidden villages. Of these kitchens where conversation still happens. Of these fields where silence is not loneliness but music. Because maybe, just maybe, the true Swiss luxury isn't in its banks or its brands, but in these corners where humanity still breathes unfiltered. And that's it for today's video. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe with the notification bell turned on so you don't miss more videos like this. See you next time.